Hi there, welcome to Tech Convo. Today we are going to check out the VLOOKUP function in Microsoft Excel. And by the end of the video, you're going to be writing your own VLOOKUP formula, and you'll also know what causes some of the most common and frustrating errors and how to prevent them. Now, this video is designed to be a follow-along tutorial, and you can download the Excel file that I used during the video. There will be a link in the description below where you can download the file and follow along and practice. Now you don't have to do this, but I highly recommend it, and it will really help you learn and master VLOOKUP faster. So go ahead and pause the video now and download the Excel data file. And if you're new to the channel, I make tutorial contents about Excel and other computer softwares. Subscribe to the channel to see my latest content as soon as they are posted. Now this tutorial is geared towards Excel learners who have never heard of VLOOKUP before, or for those who want a refresher about this function. I'm using a simple dataset which I used in my Excel basics and intermediate videos to show you how to use this formula and different scenarios where you can apply VLOOKUP. But you can even use this formula in your projects with datasets spanning tens of thousands of rows. We'll first look at a simple definition of VLOOKUP, and then we'll look at the formula structure, and then we'll go into examples where I'll show you a simple VLOOKUP, how to prevent errors, and relational VLOOKUPs where you can extract data from across sheets or different tables. So let's first understand what a VLOOKUP does. By definition, VLOOKUP is a function that looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table range and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. This function searches vertically from top to bottom, and in fact the V in VLOOKUP stands for vertical. Just like in everyday life, if you're looking at a menu card, you scan the first column with the food items listed, and when you have found the one that you're interested in, you go to the right side of the same row for its price. This is exactly how VLOOKUP function works. Now let's take a look at the VLOOKUP formula. The VLOOKUP formula in Excel has four arguments: the lookup, the table array, column index number, and the type. Now the lookup specifies the item that you are looking in the data table. This can be in the form of an employee name, employee ID, and so on. Now the table array is the range of data which Excel will look up and return results from. This can be a master data table. The column index number is usually an integer column number in the data range to return results from. Examples can be either 1, 2, 3, etc. The last argument is the type, which can be either false or true, and they are system-defined inputs which tells Excel to return an exact or an approximate match. Excel will default to an approximate match if this input is not entered by us. Most of the time when you'll use a VLOOKUP, you will want to get an exact match and hence use a 0 or false. Approximate matches can be used when there are ranges or interval data. Now that we have looked at the definition of VLOOKUP, let's go and start writing the formula. I'll go to the second tab in the practice workbook called Simple VLOOKUP, and over here I have a data set, weekly sales by employees. Now if you have seen my previous tutorials, you will see that this is the same data set I've used in those videos. With the help of VLOOKUP, I want to answer some questions regarding this dataset. I want to know what is the sales on Friday for a particular employee, in this case, Eve Snow. Now, visually, I can look at the data table, scan the first column for employee name, and then go right towards Friday, and I have 5,979. Now, if this dataset had 10,000 rows or hundreds of columns, we cannot do this exercise manually. So we'll use the VLOOKUP function to help us get to this value. So let's start typing our VLOOKUP function. I'll press equals, start typing VLOOKUP, and as soon as I type VL, the dropdown shows VLOOKUP, and press tab, and it automatically populates VLOOKUP in the formula field, and I have my four arguments ready. The first argument is the lookup value, meaning what is the value I want to look up in the data table. So that will be Eve Snow. So cell A15. The next argument is the table array, which is the entire data set from where I want to look up my data. So I'm going to select the entire table array. And one tip before we move forward is to always freeze the table array. This will be very helpful if you're copying the formula down so that your array range does not change and it remains an absolute reference. Third argument is the column index number. Now we want to know the value in the Friday column. So if we count from the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Friday is the sixth column. So we'll type 6. And the last argument is the range lookup. We want an absolute value, so we are going to write false or 0. Close the bracket and hit enter. The formula returns 5979, which is the value we see in the data table. Now, one more quick tip I wanted to share now is regarding the third argument, where you have to count the number of columns. Right now, we only have 7 columns. So it's easy to count the number of columns. But what if our data table had, let's say, 100 columns? So it won't be easy to count the position of the column. In that case, what you have to do is add a row on top of your data table and start numbering those columns. Select 1 and 2 and let Excel autofill the column numbers. You can give it a different color so that it's separate from your data table. And then go back to your formula, double click your formula, and in place of 6, select the cell number, F4 in this case, and always remember to lock the row. So I'll press F4 twice and hit enter. This way you won't have to manually count the column position. Moving on to the next part of the tutorial, let's go to the next tab in the practice workbook called VLOOKUP Table 2. In this sheet, we have the same data table, and we'll use the VLOOKUP function to get values from other data tables, which is present in the Table 2 tab. This is a data table with the employee names, employee ID, and the region where they practice their trade. So let's go back to VLOOKUP Table 2 tab, and I want to enter my employee ID and employee region after column A. So I'll add 2 columns after column A, right-click column B, and select Insert, and once more. Now let's use the VLOOKUP formula that we used in the previous tab. My lookup value is John Tucker in column A. My table array is in table 2, so I'll go to table 2, select the entire data, lock my data table using F4. My third argument is column index number. The employee ID column is the second column in the data table, so I'll write 2, comma, and we need an exact match, so 0 or false. Close the bracket and hit enter. Now, as you can see, I've got my employee ID for John Tucker, which is 1001, and I can check back with the lookup table. It is 1001. Now, before we proceed, one quick tip is to always lock your columns or rows while copying VLOOKUP formulas. In this case, I know that I'm going to copy this formula down the rows as well as the columns. So to avoid any issues with referencing, I need to make sure that my referencing does not move while I copy the formula. So I double clicked my formula and my lookup value A6 is not locked. So if I had copied this formula onto the right, I would get an error. That is because my lookup value has moved over one cell to the right when I copied the formula. To avoid this error, I'll go back to my formula and freeze my column by pressing F4 three times. Now I can copy my formula from column B to column C, and I still have to make one small change. Remember, in table 2, the region column was the third column, so my third argument should be 3 instead of 2. And that's all I need to do. I can copy both these formulas and paste them with Ctrl V. And Excel automatically pulls in all the employee IDs and regions for these employees. Now that we have learned how to use a VLOOKUP function, both in a single tab as well as across multiple tabs, let's look at some common VLOOKUP errors that you may encounter while applying this formula. So I head out to my Errors tab, and I have the same data table, and I want to answer the same question: what is the sales on Friday for this employee list? So let's begin by typing the VLOOKUP formula. My lookup value is the employee name on the left. The table array is my data table. Friday is the sixth column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I want an exact match, so false or 0, and close the bracket. So I've got Chris Wright's Friday sales, which is 1987, and I can copy this formula and paste it for the other two employees. And as soon as I paste it, I get an any error. Now let's see what's the issue. When I double click on the NA result for John Tucker, I see that the table array has shifted down by one row. So let's fix this by going to the above formula. I'll select my table array and hit F4 and press enter. And I'll again copy this formula to the below rows. Now the formula for John Tucker returns the correct sales figures, but we still have an error with the third cell. So double clicking on that, and we see that our lookup value Joe Williams is not present in our employee list. And because of that, Excel cannot return any value for this particular employee. In such cases, it is better to cover the error with a blank space or a personalized note. So I'm going to go to the first formula, and over here I'm going to type if error, select it with tab. The first argument is the value, which is our VLOOKUP formula itself. If there is no error, the VLOOKUP value will be shown, and if there is an error, I want the formula to show a blank space. Close the brackets and enter. And I'm going to copy the first formula to the rows, and there you go. Since there is no sales data for Joe Williams, the field is blank. So these two common error types are the most frequent error types you will encounter when using a VLOOKUP function. Now that we have covered what a VLOOKUP function does, how to write a VLOOKUP function, how to write a VLOOKUP across multiple tabs, and mitigate errors while writing VLOOKUP formulas, go ahead and practice these on your own. It might feel a bit overwhelming at first, but once you've downloaded the file and practiced this formula a couple of times, it will get easier. If you want, watch the video again and practice along if you have any hiccups while writing your formula. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. And also let me know what are the various scenarios in which you use VLOOKUP formula. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.